Welcome back to another episode of the Sky Society podcast. Today, I am chatting with Bonnie Wong. She is the Senior Manager of Client Engagement at Saint Laurent. Welcome, Bonnie.
Hi, Natalie. Welcome. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Bonnie was just telling me how she did an incredible wellness retreat over New Year's, which I'm very jealous of and did not even think of as an option. So I'm definitely going to have to look more into that. So Bonnie has an incredible career working in luxury fashion all throughout New York and LA. She has started her career at Chanel, where she was there for about a year before moving on to Christian Dior for 5.5 years, then on to Bottega, Hermès, and now where she's currently at Saint Laurent. So I'm super excited to talk about how you started your career in marketing, or started your career in luxury fashion, and just how you've been able to move up the ranks and stay in this space. Bonnie specifically works within client engagement and events, which is a very unique space to be in as well. So I'm very excited to jump into all of that. But before we do, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do, Bonnie?
Yeah. So I am currently the Senior Manager of Client Engagement. I'm born and raised New York, and I really travel back between LA and New York. And I've worked and lived in both places. I've been in the industry for 10 years now. Marketing is my first love, and there's so many areas in this field that, there's that can be explored. So I'm really excited to get into that.
Can you tell us what client engagement means? Because I think that's a bit unique and a term I haven't seen a lot. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so client engagement could really be, really different in any company. So typically, most companies, you'll probably see them more as CRM, client relationship management, and a lot of things can fall into CRM. Client engagement could be client experiences. It could be CRM, which is more like client data, client analytics. It could be client outreach, so it could be email marketing. It could be internal marketing. People might be familiar with loyalty. So loyalty programs, that falls under CRM. So really, client engagement could be so many things depending on the company. So I think really the nutshell of it is I really handle how do we engage our clients. So we have different aspects of our team. I really handle the client experiences and client partnerships and activities. So, really think of luxury is a very unique space, so it's not going to be like a typical marketing that you would see at like more of a mass retailer. It's not, like the loyalty programs that you might be used to it, like J. Crew or Madewell, or like Lululemon. With luxury, it's really, really bespoke and tailored. So client experience could be a lot of different things. But really, the way you should think of it is when you go to 11 Madison Park, the Michelin restaurant, you get that super unique personal client experience. It's very much like that, but except for fashion.
Yeah, and I think that is also probably what helps some of those brands like Hermes or like some of those big brands you worked at charge so much for their products as well. It's because you're not just paying for the product, but you're also paying for the experience that comes with that. I'm super curious because in your career, you have been very focused on like from where you started to where you are now. There wasn't a ton of like side or detours of kind of exploring other paths. Like you were really honed in this space. Did you know that you wanted to work in this space like for a really long time? Is it something that kind of you just ran into and figured out that you really loved it? Or how did you know this is where you wanted to be and where you wanted to build your career?
So no, I don't think anyone truly knows what they want to do. And I really find that internship is the best way to discover what it is that you want to, learn, what career path you want to take on. So I actually interned a lot before I started at Chanel. So my very first internship was at Prada, and I was doing events. This was the days of the unpaid internship. So I know those are far and few. There aren't very many of those. And in some ways, I mourn those times because internships are so competitive now because they are paid. You do have to have some sort of benefits. And because they're paid, and companies really only have budget for maybe one intern per department, if they even have one. So it really makes internships really competitive. But in my days, we had unpaid interns. So one department could have 5 interns. And It's such a great opportunity, and it really afforded me a way of like discovering what I wanted to do. So my first internship was at Prada at special events, and that was when I was really immersed in. I didn't even know this existed. I didn't even know that this, really was out there. All I knew was what I saw on TV at the time. So, Devil Wears Prada, The Hills, The City, really seeing internships like that. I'm like, okay, what's PR? Magazine. That's really all I knew. So when I joined Prada, I actually went in for an internship as an HR intern. So one to do
Really?
admin, one to file papers, like that was the internship I went into. And then HR saw my background and she was like, I think you would really be good in marketing and events. Why don't we try? Why don't you have you intern in that department? So that's kind of how it happened. And it was unpaid internship. I worked 3 days a week for free. And then on the side, I worked at Madewell in retail. So
Wow.
really, really busy then. School, unpaid internship, retail job. So definitely really gave me a good window into the industry. So Prada was my first internship in events. And then right after that, I did a PR internship at Michael Kors. So that's when I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to try different departments. So I've done events, I've done PR. And then after that, I went back to Prada, but to work on the sister brand Miu Miu, and I stayed in PR because every brand is so different. When you work for a brand like Michael Kors, it's headquarters.
Yeah.
The office is in New York. It is the worldwide office. Whereas Prada, it was a regional office. So you really learn the elements of the job is different when you work for a central office versus a regional office. And then so after Prada, I went to Chanel, and that's when I was their events, and that's really where I got into the world of CRM. And so that was my internship at Chanel. And then I was lucky enough for them to have me sign on as a freelance until I had my full time position at Dior.
That is crazy. And also, like, thank goodness you had that HR manager that was like, actually, or that person, I think you'd be fit better here because your career could have taken an entirely different path if maybe that didn't happen. I'm curious because you make a really good point about how internships now are very competitive, and the space you're in as well is even more competitive of being in that luxury fashion space. For college students right now that are applying to internships and they really want to, have an internship at Prada or have an internship at Chanel, what are some things that they can do right now to help them either be more qualified or help them stand out in those interviews?
Yeah. So my biggest, learning that I want to offer for internships is, when you are in school and you apply for an intern, you want interns at the Saint Laurent, the Hermès, the Bottegas of the world. You must have experience because again, you know, unpaid internships don't exist anymore. Each department may have budget for maybe one intern a semester. And so not only are you competing with students that are, having to travel to New York, but people that also live here, or people that are close by. So you're really, the competition is fierce in terms of an internship. So a lot of these places, the best of the best of the brands won't hire an intern without experience. They are going to hire a more seasoned intern because they can only have one. So, people are inundated with day-to-day requests, emails, texts, DM, managing the job, that they really want an intern who can just kind of jumpstart and like they could just hand them the work and like have them do it. Of course, internships is a great learning experience, but it's a two-way street. So when we as managers are hiring an intern, we really want someone who can kind of just do it without a lot of direction and really have some sort of experience. So when it comes to internships, don't get discouraged when you apply for these big brands and you're not hearing back, you're not getting an interview. The best way to do it is try everything. Like my first internship, I applied for an HR job. I just knew that, okay, I want to get into luxury. I want to do fashion. I saw this, internship on my school portal, and that's kind of how I found it. And so I applied for HR. I was like, okay, I've done some admin work before. I've done, I've worked on campus, doing office work. So I was like, I could do HR. I could figure it out. Maybe just get my foot in the door. Meet the people. So when you apply for internships, don't always go for the top brands if you don't have experience. Go work, try to look at agencies. Try to work for smaller, boutique communication firms. That's the best way to get your foot in the door. chances are they pay a little less, but it's a great opportunity for you to learn. And I really think when you're trying to get these internships, making sure you build that foundation. So, of course, you know what your end goal is. I want to eventually work at Saint Laurent. Well, if that's what you want to do, let's get some more internships and secured. So, I think that you have to be open to learning and being resourceful. And I get a lot of emails on LinkedIn asking for internship opportunities. I am so inundated with emails, and I'm sure you are as well. I'm sure they are, with texts, DMs, you can't keep up. And we have so much in our lives day to day. Everything is so fast that when you do reach out to these people in LinkedIn, if you write me a cold message and your resume is not attached, I'm not going to look at it. If you send me a resume attached with, a short email, I'll click into your resume when I'm recruiting, and I'll look at your resume and I'll forward it to HR. You may not hear from me directly. You may not get a direct response, but I've sent it along and I have HR screen. So, even when you do these outreaches on LinkedIn, help us do majority of the work so that, it's already done. So we're not taking for example, if you're reaching out to a person and you don't have anything attached, they don't know anything about you, you just wrote this cold email, can I have 5 minutes of your time? Then you need time for that person to potentially respond. Then you have to respond, find a time, and I don't have any information about you. Why would I give you 5 minutes of my time? So the best way when you reach out in those situations, always attach your resume, and being persistent, that's really key.
Bonnie, you touched over so many amazing things. I'm going to do a little recap because you touched on such good stuff. So first, I love that you said if you want to work at these big brands, you need to start with experience at smaller places. And I think that's amazing advice because you often want to skip the hard kind of gritty work and you just want to kind of like jump to the finish line of where you want to be and getting that dream internship. But the point you made is so true of that. First, get experience that's related. It doesn't need to be at the luxury fashion brand of your dreams, but at least something. So when you're applying, you can show them that you have experience. Even for you, it was just admin work. It was just general work experience, or even maybe your retail job played a role into that. Of like, hey, I kind of do work in fashion, just in a different capacity. So if you are trying to go after those big companies, start with the smaller companies to get that experience first. I think that's amazing advice. And then going out to talking about the cold outreach. I know so many women that are doing this cold outreach, whether it's on LinkedIn or email, of trying to follow up or trying to get internships or get interviews. And one thing I thought you made that was a good point is that they may not respond to you, but that doesn't mean that they didn't forward your email or you didn't forward your resume. So even if you didn't get a response, it doesn't mean that it was a failure. You just didn't hear back from that person. And so that can, I think, be a little bit of peace of mind for people that are not really hearing back. And then the other piece that you said was so good was making sure that you are doing most of the legwork for them. So you are attaching your application materials. You are letting them know I know sometimes people do follow-ups for jobs. It's like, what job opening did you apply to? Because there's several ones that are open. Like, what are you interested? What's your resume, your LinkedIn, like all of that information. So it makes it so much easier. And then being persistent too, knowing that people's inboxes are full and just because they don't respond may just be because your email got lost, and not being afraid to follow up or be persistent in that area. So amazing. So much good stuff there. I love it. Okay, Bonnie. So you went to Chanel, and this is kind of where you started your huge, 10-year career working with events and within client engagement. So can you talk to me kind of about how this beginning part of your career looked and what you learned at Chanel about what this space looked like or what, client experiences looked like within the luxury space?
Yeah. So when I was at Chanel, at that point, I'd already had a few internships, so I knew what I was getting into. But once you get to Chanel, it's really a different level. It's a different experience. So, I was working with the events director and events manager to kind of execute what the event programming was that year. So we're really looking at what stores are opening, what clientels we need to, to kind of recruit, what clients we need to treat. And that's when I really was immersed in the kind of the strategy of it. And I really learned the production element. When you're at that level, you're really doing, every job has admin, every job has things that needs to get done. But maybe it's not the fun stuff. You're talking about invoices, you're talking about competitive research, you're talking about, you know, um, finding out, where's the coolest places to go, the most exclusive musicians, all of that. So in that element, in in that time, I'm really just learning the ins and outs of it. So just learning how to fill out a timeline, filling out how to, from start to finish, plan an event. So that's really what I was learning at Chanel. And but it was a really wonderful time, and I learned a lot about events and how we start and execute a strategy when it's given to us. So that was kind of my time at Chanel, really just learning those key things that you do at that age, and everything that you learn at each job. You really take away from it. Every single project you work on, every person you meet. The industry is incredibly small, so you always run into each other, and as you go on in your your career, you meet those people again. So at in Chanel, yeah, just kind of that's the takeaway, really learning about, how to start an event from start to finish.
Amazing. And then, so then you moved on, and I don't think we'll have time to talk in depth about each of the roles you had, but I'm sure as you move forward in your career through Christian Dior, Bottega, Hermès, that you also started to get more responsibility, to learn more. I'm sure the events that you were in charge of were larger, or you just played a more significant role in planning those experiences. Can you tell me about a favorite engagement or event that you create or that you were a part of, and kind of what that process looked like from idea to execution?
Yeah, so I was at Dior for 6 years, pretty much 6 years, and there I did events from from even an in-store event. So when you get invited to the store to discover the new collection, to the fashion show. So really, it runs the gamut. And during that time, I really learned about how to speak with the retail stores, how to speak with executives, and then how to execute and create a plan. And it's during these times that you really learn about your own skills, what you're good at, what you can work on, but also learning how to work as a team and how to collaborate. So, my favorite project actually was at Bottega, and it's very memorable. I think that there's this, when you look at it from a rose color lens on the outside, you see an amazing event, but it's always the most fun, the biggest event that is always the most stressful and the most tedious. So, at Bottega, I was lucky enough to be there when during Daniel Lee's tenure. And, when you're, changing a brand, trying to basically introduce and rebrand the with the new designer, so much goes into that. So just trying to understand what the new brand DNA is, how do we properly communicate that, how do we share that Daniel Lee's vision, and then we obviously take all of that and put it out into the world through the eyes of marketing and events. So the best event, I guess my favorite or most memorable event was the Miami Art Basel event. So this
Mhm.
was at the heels of after the British Fashion Awards, where he kind of swept and won 4 awards. Historic win. He immediately flew to Miami Art Basel. And it was during that time we took over the 11th Street Diner, this historic diner in Miami. We wrapped it in gold, reminiscent of the collection campaign. And we just had VIPs there. It was an experiential event. So we had changed all the uniforms for the staff, where they had custom Bottega diner T-shirts.
Oh,
Really creating lots of fun activations in this space. So it was it was really fun because and memorable because it was kind of one of the first largest events that we had done under Daniel Lee. So always very always very memorable when I think back to that.
yes, it sounds incredible. And I can see what you're saying is as the events get larger, there's more variables that I'm assuming make it stressful before the event, and also I'm sure at the event, making sure everything runs the way that you envisioned it. I'm curious because this event sounds massive, and you guys are thinking about all these different details, like what the waiters are wearing and all these little activations. What does the brainstorming process look like when you're coming up with an event? Is it like, do you guys start with larger or larger than life ideas and kind of have to like whittle them down within budget, or where do you go for inspiration, or how does this idea process start?
Yeah. So Bottega, in Americas is a regional office. So we report and work very closely with our central office. So a lot of it is in partnership with them. So, when we are planning events, we really look at the full year and key markets, and what are key times. So, this is where you take these skills from previous jobs, is where you're starting to realize, oh, there's key moments within the US, especially when you're working at a regional office. What are these moments? It could be a Super Bowl, it could be Aspen Art Week, it could be Freeze LA, it could be Freeze New York, it could be New York Fashion Week, it could be Miami Art Basel. You're really looking at it from that standpoint. Is like, okay, what are the key moments within our region that we need to consider? Then you have to consider, retail. Where is your stores located? What are the best performing stores? What stores have the has the clients and the clientele that we need to really, make this event lively. So you're literally looking at all these different elements. And from a communication standpoint, really from an image standpoint, who's going to come to these events, which ambassador is going to be able to join us, all these different elements that we need to consider. And that's really where you're learning to work with multi departments, to
Mm.
kind of come up with a strategy to support this moment. So specifically for this event, we're working centrally with our central office. So we knew that Miami Art Basel was something that we wanted to participate in, and the ideation is in partnership, hand in hand. So we work with an agency. We have to source an agency that we feel like can help us execute this event at the caliber that we need. And of course, Daniel Lee is a creative director, so he has he's really behind it. When you see these massive events, for example, like Pharrell's recent show at LV, they're creatives. They are the ones that are dreaming of this, coming up with the ideas. But we work very closely with an agency to kind of ideate and make it happen. So there's a lot that goes behind the scenes
Yeah.
in so many different elements, whether that's PR, marketing, merchandising, like what's going to be in the store. Is there exclusive product that's going to be in the store during this time? So there's so many elements to it. But in terms of like the ideation of the event, it really starts from, the head of the communications team, and usually the creative director themselves.
I also love how you mentioned that before all of that part starts, there's this research element to it. It's not just like you're going like, okay, we're throwing a big event. Like, let's just come up with ideas. It's like, okay, let's do our research first, look at the key elements from the year. You're talking with all the different departments. And I love that that's the first step, is being more strategic with it. And really thinking through all of those different elements before coming up with the big event ideas. I'm also curious, as you're being a part of these events and you're going through, and the amount of time and everything that it takes, and the budget that's going into these events, what or how do you measure success from an event? Because is it quantifiable, or do you guys even try to measure success?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Measuring is a huge part of every position that you do. So yeah, absolutely. And each measurement of success for the event is really depends on what the objective of the event is. So for example, if you were to go to a pop-up, an experiential pop-up, in the city that's happening, um, or the chances are, if it's open to the public, they're trying to get engagement. So it's like, are people discovering? Are people signing up for emails? Are people, taking TikToks and Instagram? Are they posting it? So, if the objective of the event is to drive brand awareness, then all of those elements of, insights and all of that is important. Or if the event is solely focused on the clientele, then it's really about sales, how much sales you generate.
Mhm.
So, every event is different. There's not, one event that really, of course, there's one event that if it's a multi-day event and can be scheduled so that you hit all these different, targets, then that's of course the um the end result, what we're looking for. I
Okay,
hope
so it can
that's
be a
clear.
number of people that engage with the event, the number of sales that were generated,
Exactly.
or maybe if people were sharing it on social media, the impressions and the reach that those shares are getting. And so that and then what you're tracking relates back to what your goal was with the event before you started.
Exactly. So again, the objective is to typically decided right in the beginning. So why are we doing this?
Mhm.
is usually the first thing that we kind of determine.
Well, Bonnie, can you tell me now? So we talked a little bit about Chanel, Christian Dior, and Bottega. I know you're at Saint Laurent right now, but before then you were at Hermes for a year and a half. I'm curious because I know all of these places that you're working at are really high luxury, but when I think of Hermes, I think of Hermes almost on like a different scale of luxury, obviously with um, the Kelly, I think the Birkins, it's like the Birkin bags are like a whole entire thing that I feel like Hermes has done so well of creating this exclusivity, this experience. Like I feel like I see on social media all the time when someone's so lucky that they get to, go purchase one of these bags. Can you tell me a little bit about your time at Hermes, maybe what your favorite part about events or experiences was while you were working there?
Yeah, so when I joined Hermes, it was a brand new team. They had an events team that really sat under communications. And they kind of branched out and created this department, which really focuses on events for the clients, so commercial activity. And it was really a big team, so it encompassed myself, who handled all the commercial activity. And then, of course, we had CRM, data analytics. Hermes is not like anywhere else I've worked. They're structured a very specific way. They do things their own way. I had an amazing time. I think my favorite um, kind of part about that role was really the team. It was kind of a team structure that I had never been used to. We sat with after sales as well. That was also under our team because Hermes, first and foremost, the product is number one. So when a client purchases something, after sales care is part of that client experience. So it was very, very interesting. I've always typically either sat under marketing or communications. I've never sat under kind of a larger client experience umbrella that encompassed all these different elements. So that was very interesting. On top of that team, we had someone that handled just dealing with equestrian. So that was incredibly eye opening.
Wow.
Yeah, so, she really just went out there and, just saddles and and everything related to equestrian. So it's really interesting. It's really fascinating company and world, and I really loved my time there. And my team was the best. So I think for the most part, that's what I enjoyed the most. A
Yeah.
strong team is very rare and really hard to find. And I find that when people start, obviously getting higher into their positions, they'll realize that more, that your boss is a huge part of your job, your team is a big part of your job, the people you work with. So I hope that's a nice takeaway for everyone.
Yes, and going into your role now, was that something that you were looking for when you left Hermes to go to Saint Laurent, or is that something that when you're in the interview process or when you're talking to people that you're considering of like, how do I think I would fit well on this team, or who would I be reporting to, and do I enjoy talking to that person, or kind of do you carry that through the interview process?
Absolutely. I think as you obviously, when you're just starting out, you're so hungry and you really want the opportunity. I think as you progress more into your career, not only are you learning new skills, like, maybe you're now becoming a manager and you have to learn to manage people. That's, kind of the next wave of your career once you kind of have built that. Um, every interview, it's really important to remember that not only are you interviewing, you're also interviewing them. So you want to make sure that, this is, you work 5 days a week. You're spending a lot of time with these people. So you want to make sure that they're a right fit for you. So I think that's incredibly important.
And in this area within luxury fashion marketing, when you're getting these new roles and you're moving companies, is that typically from connections that you're meeting along the way, or is that from you applying to jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed?
So in the beginning of my career, it was very like it was a hustle. So you worked at these unpaid internships, you try to put your best foot forward, make a good impression. And then, from then I was just applying to internships. And then of course the industry is very small. So chances are if you're coming from an internship from a certain brand, that person knows someone who knows someone, and they will basically get like an approval, like a recommendation. So that's kind of how my internships have, kind of taken shape. So I've always applied, but someone always will ask someone to see if you're a good candidate. So people in this industry, because it's so small and tight knit, Reputation is really incredibly important, which is why, right in the beginning, you should learn to be proactive, resourceful, and really learn to be interpersonable. So those are really all important takeaways. And then, for the jobs, more recently, as I've gone in my career, they're really by my network. Once you get into that certain level, you're not really applying for a job because you're working at some of the best of the best. So the companies that if you have a position that's opened up, chances are someone will reach out to you, whether that's a recruiter, whether that's someone in your network who says like, come please work for me. And that's how I joined Saint Laurent. My boss was a former colleague and mentor, and he reached out and said, will you please work with me? Because I really need some support and I think it'd be great for the job. So that's usually how it happens once you get to that level.
And tell me a little bit about your role now that you're at Saint Laurent. What does a day or a week in your life look like? What are your main responsibilities? And yeah, what do you do?
Yeah, so my main responsibility is client engagement. So really creating all the events and experiences to create brand loyalty, recruit new clients, and really generate sales and business for the brand. That's kind of in a nutshell. So my day to day, so right now it's January 4th, 5th. We are already planning and executing our calendar for the year. So working hand in hand with our central office to kind of execute that and making sure that we meet all our targets and what our goals for the company is for this year. So
So you plan them
that's
all out in January, like for the whole year?
so we already have our whole year kind of built
Oh,
because
wow.
we get assigned our budgets and then you come up with a strategy. Things change all the time. So in these positions, when you continue to get more and more experience, you have to learn to be very nimble, adjust to change. A lot of things happen very last minute in fashion. So we, of course, we have a general idea of our plan and our year, but things change. So of course we anticipate for that, but we're already kind of coming out of the gate running. So
I know you just said your budget is assigned to you and you work within that. Do you ever have to go and negotiate for a larger budget or try to get more money? Or is it normally just like what you're assigned is what you have to work with?
it really depends. I think usually it's what you're assigned, but that's really when you worked under strict limitations. That's when you become most creative. So that's where you learn to
Mhm.
negotiate. That's when you learn to work with other departments to see, like, okay, like what can we cut? What's not a priority? So it really teaches you how to be strategic and really maximizing your dollar. So that's all part of the job, all things you learn throughout your career. So yeah.
I love that. Having more strict limitations forces you to be creative. I think that can also be a transferable skill of someone looking to get in the space. I'm sure you can think of other situations where you've been under restrictions, but kind of were forced to be creative or think outside of the box to meet your goals. I love that. So now having been in this space for over 10 years, what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned, or maybe some of the biggest pieces of advice you'd like to pass on for younger women looking to kind of follow a career path similar to yours?
Yeah, I would say I'll leave you 3 tips. One is being open to learning, be proactive. My number one thing is being resourceful. So, before you ask a question and you don't know the answer, but it's something that's Googleable, Google it. That is my biggest recommendation there is being resourceful, being proactive. Always learning, the marketing landscape changes a lot, whether you choose to do events, whether you choose to do communications or CRM, email marketing, all of those things. See what's out there, join the mailing list, see what the emails look like, see what's the new cool hot places. What are people doing to kind of get your attention? How are people using Instagram? How are people using TikTok? Like what's the next new thing? So just open to learning and being proactive is incredibly important. And I guess the second takeaway is really learning how to be interpersonable. So really, when you're starting out, you need to make sure that people want to work with you, that you're kind. Nobody wants to work with someone that's mean and not friendly. So really, creating that, kind of social currency is incredibly important, especially when you're starting out and you're starting to network. And then lastly, just really be a self starter, really be determined. Everyone appreciates someone who has hustle. So That's what I recommend
I
most highly.
love those. I want to go quickly back to the one that what you said about being interpersonal, because I think we all to a sense understand that at a certain point in your career, or even ideally the earlier you can start, of getting recommendations is the best way to get your next job, right? It's much better than just applying blindly on LinkedIn. It's much better to have a recommendation. And as you said, you got those recommendations, people that worked with you, they enjoyed working with you, and they remembered you. And then later on, they ended up calling you back or making a connection or making that referral for you. If you did apply to the job, they're the one making that recommendation. But I'm also curious because this space seems very competitive. So I'm also curious, like, how do you navigate that competitiveness of, I'm sure there's people that you worked with that maybe you were competing with for a role or that you're both trying to move up, but you're also want to be, like you said, be kind, be interpersonal, keep these connections. Do you find that a challenge to balance both? Or do you find that it's not that difficult to kind of avoid that tension, I guess?
I want to think of it as, of course, you can look at it as our own as like competition.
Mhm.
But I think it's almost better to see that person could be someone that I can work well with and be a partner with and be an ally. So I think that, of course, it's natural to have competition in the workplace, but I find that, if you put in the work and you're really good about working with others, there will be a time and a place for you. And if it's not that one, don't be discouraged because then that one's just not meant for you. Timing is everything. And I think that when you work with someone and you're competitive, there's obviously a healthy element to that because we're all at the end of the day trying to strive for the same goal.
Mhm.
But it comes again with politics and all of that you'll learn in
Yeah.
in your role as you get older, and as you get into your career. So, I think the best way to think of it and the healthy way to look at it is there'll be a time and a place for me. Put in the work, meet the people, network, and making sure that that people want to work with you. And then at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that it will be fate and something will open up for you.
I think that's really beautiful and a good perspective to have because I think the unfortunate truth is not everybody thinks that way. And I feel like when I was younger in my career, I was really intimidated by the people that I felt were more like cutthroat about like going after opportunities. And so I like your perspective of like put in the work, but also understand like if you didn't get an opportunity, it's just not your time and that there's something else out there for you. And you don't have to look at it as you're competing with everyone. I think especially for women, and this podcast is predominantly for women, of just trying to support each other. And that helps us go so much farther than always just looking at the other person as your opponent.
Absolutely.
Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for walking us through your career journey and sharing your advice and lessons that you've learned along the way. It was so much fun getting a peek into your life, into your career. And thank you so much for coming on the Sky Society podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.